Can you see the screen?
We can see your screen, yes.
Yes, great. So this talk is going to be a dash through. It started off over 100 slides, then I cut it down to 84, and now it's down to 50 odd, so I'm going to have to talk quickly. So apologies for that in advance. This is not so much about the objects in the Egypt Centre, many of which you will see, and also Ken will talk about. Rather, this is a personal view about what we did with our share of the Wellcome collection. So I'm going to concentrate on the 1997 to present. I must point out before I start that this is very much a personal view. I've cut out all the slides where we won awards because I thought you'd get bored of this. And don't worry, it is sanitised. As I say, it is a personal view. So September the 17th, 1917, you've already heard that 92 crates of artefacts arrived in Swansea. Gwyn Griffiths has written an article about this, which is on our website, Inscriptions December 2000, which states that a part of the reason that the objects came to Swansea was because of the tafia. That's exactly what he said. Dixon was a fluent Welsh speaker, and he was the man tasked at UCL for giving out the collection. Dixon justified the giving of the collection to Swansea, not because of its Welsh connections, but he said because it had 3 qualified Egyptologists, with this lady here, Kate Boss-Griffiths, being one of them, who had worked in Munich, Oxford and Berlin. Kate Boss-Griffiths, we sometimes complain about her because she doesn't seem to have necessarily done things exactly as modern curators would do. We complain about her in the Egypt Centre, but actually without this lady, we would not have had the collection in Swansea. And the collection has always found unlikely allies. Here in the chemistry department, kindly gave up space to allow the sorting of artefacts. And maybe this wasn't quite so unlikely as you might think, actually, however, because Gwyn Griffiths, Kate Boss-Griffiths' husband, and Professor Purnell of the chemistry department had been to the same Sunday school. In 1971, with the help from the university arts photographer Roger Davis, Kate was able to display the collection, in 1976, in North Arts, now Keir Hardie. Visitors came by appointment and they included school children, but also professors of Egyptology and many others too. The museum was open 2 afternoons a week, and we have a plaque to Kate in the Egypt Centre. Just another picture. Luckily for us, throughout her years looking after the Wellcome objects, Kate kept a series of notebooks which contain some vital information. This has been added to our catalogue, but more recently Ken has been using volunteers, you're going to hear about that later, to transcribe those books, and much more thoroughly, so more secrets have been revealed about the collection. Just another picture of Kate's 1976 display. One of those who gave their Egyptological expertise to the Wellcome collection in Swansea, and up until his death in 2016 to the Egypt Centre, was Anthony Donohue, pictured here on the left, a great friend of Kate's and had been a great friend for many years. In the 90s, another person, Sybil Crouch, on the right, offered the suggestion that the small, relatively little-known collection in North Arts, which Kate looked after, be fully open to the public. Sybil, aided by others, applied for Heritage Lottery funding and European development funding for this. And by the late 90s, developments were afoot to build a purpose-built museum annexed to Sybil's art centre. Sybil was in charge of the art centre at Swansea. Sybil suggested a local artist, Amber Hiscott, to produce stained glass specially to decorate the building. This is one of it. Fittingly, for part of an art centre that already housed a theatre and an art gallery. And another picture of what it looked like when it opened in 1997, but we weren't actually officially open. Before we opened it and filled all the spaces up. And it's where I came in as the first professional curator. A management team had been set up, chaired by Alan Lloyd of the Classics Department. When I arrived as the sole member of staff, the building was complete, cases were ready to go in. Anthony Donohue, the consultant, had decided on objects to display. The whole thing, I was told, I came in August 97, I was told I had to open by March 1998, but there was no office furniture, no access to the collection or catalogue. Thankfully, much of this was remedied over the following. And very luckily for me, sorry about this grotty picture, but it is an old one, a student in the classics department became an almost full-time member of staff. This lady here in the blue, Wendy Goodrich, a true godsend. And we were open unofficially, if not in March, by mid-1998, while we tested things out. By August the following year, Wendy was fully employed. She's pictured here with other volunteers and our Mark I mummy, one of our very sort of homemade type objects, but nonetheless very successful with them. And this is the type of thing that the Museum's Journal described us when opened as quirky and homespun, an accolade we're actually very proud of now. Over the years, Wendy has not only supported her colleagues, including me, but also showed a lot of lateral thinking. For example, when ancient Egypt was taken out of the national curriculum in 2000, she made sure schools kept visiting by teaching skills and even mathematics from the Egypt Centre. More on that later. This is a picture of the upstairs gallery in the early days. One of the first things we tried to do was to find out how many objects we had. It was clear that the state of 3,000 objects was an underestimate. However, it was also clear that some things had been catalogued several times and other things only once. Several trips to the Wellcome Institute, those were in the days before digitisation, helped match some of our orphan cards with objects, a process which Ken is still undertaking some 20 years later. While a consultant had been used to choose objects, as we had gradually uncovered secrets, it became clear that some artefacts were hitherto thought unimportant, and those which probably no Egyptologist would have chosen from the Wellcome collection in 1971 were actually really fascinating. This is just one example. It is a coffin of a bird. It's covered in gold leaf. There's a drawing of the type of thing it is there. I could give you many more examples, such as Ken's discovery of the Neferu Rare depiction, but it's probably easiest for you to look on our website and at our YouTube site, where lots and lots of talks are posted. The official opening in September 1998 with Robin Williams here, the then VC, Sybil Crouch, the great and the good. You can see Alan Lloyd here, the tall cedars, and at least one hewer of wood. I won't say who that is. You heard Alan talk on Wednesday about how difficult it was to get some of his colleagues to engage in our collection, despite the fact that we had not only Egyptological items, but classical items as well. Thankfully, that doesn't seem to be the case any longer. I think perhaps part of the problem was that with a concentration on studying literature, as is often the case in universities, few knew how to or could see any value in teaching with objects. But as I said, things are changing. Teachers, on the other hand, were much more open to this. So we had a lot more success with schools. We were one of the first museums to have a handling board with real ancient Egyptian objects out. And at the time, this was quite novel, but we really wanted to share the experience of object-centered learning with all, not just a few elite. The Museums Association Code of Ethics might state that we should think about the visions of previous owners, but I'm sorry, Sir Henry, our museum was going to be inclusive and include stragglers. Sir Henry Wellcome didn't want his museum to be for stragglers. We implemented these various usual strategies, which I won't go into now, but sometimes these came in for a bit of, well, they don't do that at the British Museum, that sort of talk. And from the get-go, we needed volunteers. These are two of our early volunteers from July 1998, though the pictures are taken later, and some more here, and lots of hands-on, low-tech activities rather than lots of computers. In February 1999, we started our child volunteer programme. We believe at the Egypt Centre that if you want to influence people, it's best to get to them young. By the time they're 16, which is when universities tend to concentrate on getting them in, it can often be just a little bit too late. Our child volunteer programme is inclusive. We don't just deal with children who are high flying. We also have children who suffer from autism, lots of different types, all social groups and ethnicities. In February 2000, although a very small museum, we did something that usually only larger museums did. As we relied heavily on volunteers and realised we needed a volunteer manager, we appointed this gentleman here, Stuart Williams. The same year, with a vital part played by the Egypt Centre staff, the Classics Department appointed a new Egyptology lecturer, Kasia Spakowska, and Egyptology could then be taught to undergraduates by 2 Egyptologists, the 2 only 1. In January 2002, our very first Saturday workshops for disadvantaged children started. Sorry about the quality of the slide. This was made possible through Heritage Lottery New Opportunities Funds. Friends of the Egypt Centre involvement in the setting up also meant that we could carry money over from one year to the next as we raised it, and also appoint our volunteers as members of staff for the Saturday, as they had been doing this job for nothing for so long. One of the most important things about the Saturday workshops, by the way, this is really Wendy Goodrich's baby, it's still going today, was the raising of confidence of children. Although we were teaching them through Egyptology, the most important thing was raising confidence. And so you can see here that they're given certificates to say that they are young Egyptologists. I could tell you lots of amusing anecdotal stories about that, but there's lots more slides to get through. In those early days, we did a lot of fundraising. This is just one of our events, and another, particularly to raise money for our Saturday workshops. These are now fully funded by the university, but bear in mind, this was the early days. And we also took part in the Nile Cycle Challenge in October 2003. In this, we were supported by staff from the Taliesin, such as Eric Talbot and Sybil Crouch, who is pictured here, and also the university finance officer, Gary Astley, a very important man, but here he is helping us out. There was a little bit of opposition as we were raising money for our own projects and also for a children's home in Luxor. Some Egyptology academics felt we should be raising money for Swansea students, and they felt pretty aggrieved at this type of thing, but we went ahead anyway. Ken, as a very young person here, was appointed shortly after as our bearings coordinator. What had happened was we won, for all the stuff that we did with our volunteers, we won an award. I said I wouldn't talk about awards, but I will briefly mention this one. We won an award with a sum of money attached to it. And Ken was appointed to train and guide our volunteers through such things as label writing. We also were able to buy more props for the galleries, audio guides, and 1 or 2 other things as well. We were very, very pleased to have that. This was our first 2-day conference, I think the first Egyptological conference in Swansea. In our conferences too, we aimed to be inclusive. These were open to the public and included both academic talks as well as more popular ones. And we also tried to be interdisciplinary. This was at the launch of the Rind Mathematical Papyrus. You can see we've got a young lad here. Wendy Goodrich produced some boards and that could be lent out to schools about ancient Egyptian mathematics. Schools can come to us. They still can, at least there will be soon when we open properly again, could come to us and spend all day doing ancient Egyptian mathematics. So this was an example of Wendy thinking laterally. And this really is Egyptology for all, because we've got Richard Parkinson there. We've got Professor Truman of the Maths Department. And also this gentleman here is a very, very famous mathematician, but I'm afraid his name escapes me. Very sorry if we've got any mathematicians out there. This maths and writing case was paid for by the Maths Department. We still have friends in unusual places. And our first International Egyptology Conference in Swansea, a couple of years later, the proceedings were published. This was the conferences where our allowing a slightly alternative Egyptologist to speak meant us being banned from organising conferences for a couple of years, but we're back in business again. We were always useful for VCs and other people to show off to the guests. This is 2006, a royal visit. And my most not important memory, it's a rather silly memory, but one of the memories I have from that day was the police dog who came to check for bombs, etc., stole my sandwich, despite the fact that it was a vegan sandwich. Anyway, January 2007, our first online catalogue was launched. We thought we would get many more inquiries than we actually did, but it seems that Egyptologists sometimes look at catalogues of large museums, but not necessarily smaller ones. They tend to be a little bit hidden. So there we were, sitting on, for example, a material from the unpublished Armand excavations of the 1930s, and it was some time before academic Egyptologists realised. In 2007, we borrowed some more objects from the British Museum. And here you can see a little booklet written by Wendy and Stuart. And this is John Brumfitt one of our volunteers. I think he's actually shown how big this box is. The British Museum loan arrived in this huge box, which we were supposed to keep if the objects went back. But I have a confession to make. I don't know where that box is. It was so big for our tiny, tiny galleries that we had a job to find anywhere to store it. I think we'll have to buy another one if ever those things go back. But thank you to the British Museum for their loan. From 2007, we introduced a number of new cases. We had little tiny display cases, which we didn't really like for various reasons, which I won't go into. But from 2007, as we had a series of cases, partly funded by the Welsh Government, but 1 year we received our fakes and forgeries case, shown here, was designed by student volunteer Olivia, along with Wendy Goodrich. Our first international loan to Madrid, and I'll just move on to, I've just gone past the slide I was going to show you. In 2012, we were given, or rather loaned, a collection of objects from Woking College. They'd originally were going to give them to the British Museum, but when they offered them to the British Museum said, well, if we took them, they'd only go in our stores. How about sending them to this small museum in Wales? They'll be able to use them. So thank you, British Museum, again. And this is one of my favourite objects from the Woking loan. It's a small bell in the shape of the god Bez. And this became, when we reported it, very famous, so famous that it was called the googly-eyed god. I think that's one of our papers described it. And it was reported as far afield as Egypt. We did try and do things not just for Egyptology. You saw the maths. This is 2013, our Science and Technology Day. This is an object. I did say in one of the earlier talk about pretend mummies or false mummies. This is an object that we had in the Egypt Centre. When I first started there, we had it X-rayed. We couldn't really see anything through the X-ray. We really assumed that that mummy was a fake. And then in some years later, the Swansea Singleton Hospital, thank you Singleton Hospital, agreed to CAT scan it. That's what's happening here. This is the result. There is actually a fetus in there. That is the fetal sac there. And somebody from Singleton Hospital estimated that it was a 12 to 16-week-old fetus. There were various other bits and pieces that you could see in here. I think these are the folds of the bandages, including some things that we think may well be beads, but we need perhaps another scan to check that out. And this was part of our long-standing relationship with Richard Johnson of the engineering department. We had various, when we came to the Egypt Centre, rather smelly lumps of mummified remains, some of them obviously human, some of them in shapes of cats, but also this one, which is basically a lump. We had it micro CT scanned. Richard Johnson in engineering kindly did it for us. And you can see that it's a snake. He printed out a 3D model for us of said snake. And this is just a quick picture of a look through the snake, which I'll see if I can play. I won't leave it on for too long, but I just wanted to show you how impressive that really was. Snake, he turns round. There's all sorts of exciting things about this snake as well, like the lumps there in its mouth, which may or may not be natron. In 2014, we opened our under fives area. Thank you to the Welsh Government who gave us some money for it, and Wendy for organising it. Lots of playthings for under fives. They make a lot of noise. They drive me mad, but it's something that we do. Our first night at the museum in 2014, and in 2016, we organised a murder mystery. We may be very small, but we managed to squish in a tent, etc., and organise this murder mystery event. In 2018, sorry, this is one of our awards. We are very, very proud of this. I couldn't miss it out. In 2018, we won the Queen's Award for Voluntary Service, which is equivalent to an MBE. So they came and checked us out to see if we were worthy of having it or not. 2018, we hosted the CPEC conference, which was a great event. We've got Sybil here and her husband, who was the mayor, and various other Egyptologists that some of you might recognise. Slightly marred by the fact that some of our Egyptian colleagues were barred from entering the UK, but that's by the by. So the COVID years, we all know about them. These coincided with developments that started shortly before and were introduced by two very important members of staff, Ken Griffin, who wasn't long appointed, and also Hannah Sweetapple, who did lots of online education stuff. Now, this is something we produced. It was really a thing that we did internally to try and show our own university how important we were. So it wasn't necessarily meant for you. But this is last year, and it gives an idea of the type of things that we managed to do despite the fact that we were closed to the public. And a big thank you to all staff and volunteers who've been working on this. You will see more of this later, but guess who implemented this? Our very own Sam Channer, who's been helping with all these meetings. And I'm just going to run through very quickly some overarching themes that have happened over the years. Our staff and volunteers over the years have spent a lot of time on non-museum stuff, helping each other and also students. For example, this is just a couple of examples. They've been involved in getting people in sheltered housing, helping volunteers with mental health issues, getting medical assessments done for other volunteers, etc. And I'm really, really proud of them. I would also like to say that we are quirky and homespun and proud of it. For example, we cannot afford a photographer, so Ken has learnt photography and his pictures are great. We have gotten friends and family involved in making props for us. So Wendy's sister made our now dummy mummy. But at the same time, we've also done a lot of research, and I think you've heard some of it and we'll hear more later. And our volunteers do go on to great things. Not only Ken, who used to be a volunteer and is now employed by us, but also some other volunteers as well, such as one who became a lecturer at the University of East Anglia. There could be other examples as well. I have wondered whether we would have done better as a science museum, because you can see there seemed to be a move away from the arts, especially in the latter years of the Egypt Centre. We've got here the Great Hall on the Bay Campus, and here's the opening of the Bay Campus by the old VC. And this campus is devoted to science rather than the arts. So a lot of money went into that. And our art gallery in the Taliesin, unfortunately, was closed down. But there you go. We have offered STEM topics, but maybe we should start thinking about being a science museum. We'll have to see what transpires in the near future. I think now that academia sees the point of us more, and museums outside academia accept us as a proper museum, I do hope so. We have struggled with some important exceptions over the years to involve academia in Swansea, with the appointment, for example, of Christian and Ersin in the classics department and Ken Griffin in the Egypt Centre. These are just some quotes that we've had over the years, but I think we don't get so many of those type of quotes now focused on us. So thank you very much. I was a bit worried that if I listed a load of people, I might miss some. And of course, we have been supported by Swansea University. We started off with 1 member of staff and now have 6 full-time members of staff and lots of volunteers. Sadly, 3 in the last couple of weeks have passed away, nothing to do with COVID, but it is a bit sad when we lose some volunteers who've been with us a long time. And also a big thank you on a personal note to this lady who is my line manager, this lady in the middle, for over 20 years. Someone who is amazing, brave and very human. And Sybil, I do miss you still. And thank you to everybody who's listened for your indulgence. I hope the Egypt Centre dances on and on. And like the can continues to scandalise some and earn the praise of so many more.
We have got a couple of minutes for questions for Carolyn. If you'd like to put any into the Q&A, please do. But I just wanted to share a comment that Isabel Vella Gregory has put into the chat. She says, absolutely loved all the details and they really contribute to the human story. And I think it's as important to archaeology as more, in quotes, traditional research. Also, props to Swansea for being inclusive and innovative from the outset, seeing the children, it's amazing to see their faces, and also hello vintage Ken. P.S. the naysayers are wrong, and I think that's a lovely comment. Thank you for that, Isabel. I can't see questions coming through just yet, but I'll have time for them to refresh. I just wanted to ask you in the meantime sort of what you're most looking forward to about being able to get back into the collection and the Egypt Centre, hopefully next week, is it, when you reopen?
Yeah, well, next week Ken is doing an online course, and I'm going to try something that's going to be a bit experimental and may not even work. So you may be able to see a fool of myself trying to do an exploration of our textiles in the gallery, but also do some demonstrations. So we're going to be, for example, seeing textiles in the gallery, and then we are going to switch to me trying to dye linen with madder, for example, trying to do it the Egyptian way. So it's going to be a new thing that we're trying, half gallery, half live demonstration, probably a lot of things going wrong. And I've had to clean up my kitchen ready for it as well.
It sounds wonderful.
So that's one of the things.